A diamond for a piece of glass. For 7 years, Aurora led a simple life, hiding her multi-billionaire identity for the man she loved. She traded boardrooms for charity bake sales, haute couture for bargain finds, all for a husband who saw her as nothing more than a stepping stone. When he cast her aside for a woman of greater wealth, he thought he was moving up in the world. He had no idea he had just discarded a diamond for a piece of glass. This is the story of how a hidden heiress, betrayed and broken, unleashed her true power and returned to demolish his world. To the outside world, Aurora Mendez was painfully ordinary. She lived in a modest 2-story colonial home in the quiet town of San Diego, a town more known for its historical charm than its proximity to the spheres of the ultra-wealthy. Her days were a gentle rhythm of tending her small garden, volunteering at the local library, and preparing elaborate meals for her husband, Leo Fernandez. She drove a reliable 5-year-old car, clipped coupons, and her greatest extravagance was a weekly latte from the local cafe. Her daily life was sweet, unassuming, and completely devoted to the man she had married 7 years prior. Leo was the center of her universe. He was handsome, ambitious, and possessed a charisma that could charm the most hardened cynic. He worked as a mid-level financial analyst at a respectable, but unremarkable, firm in downtown San Francisco. To his colleagues, he was a man on the rise, sharp and ambitious, but held back by his humble circumstances. "If I only had the capital," he would sigh to his work friends over cheap beers, "I could be running this city." What no one knew, least of all Leo, was that the woman he came home to every night, the woman who mended his socks and meticulously managed their tight budget, was not Aurora Mendez, the orphan she pretended to be. She was Aurora Ferreira, the sole heiress to the Ferreira global conglomerate, a worldwide empire with holdings in technology, real estate, and energy, valued at over $200 billion. Aurora had met Leo during her senior year at San Francisco University, where she was studying art history under a false name, desperate to experience normalcy after a childhood suffocated by tutors, bodyguards, and the cold, calculating world of high finance. Her parents, Ricardo and Eleanor Ferreira, had been brilliant but distant figures, more at home in a boardroom than a playroom. They had died in a private plane crash when she was 18, leaving her in the care of her formidable grandmother, Augusta Ferreira, the sole heir to their vast fortune. Crushed by the weight of her inheritance and the world's prying eyes, Aurora had hatched a plan to run away. Just for a while. Leo, then a scholarship business student, was everything her world was not. He was passionate. He saw her for who she was, and he seemed unconcerned with wealth or status. When he proposed a simple life away from the glittering pressures of the elite, Aurora saw it as a romantic fantasy come true. She believed she had found a man who loved her, not her name. And so, with a heavy heart, but a hopeful spirit, she made a decision. She placed her entire fortune in a blind trust, accessible only through a complex series of protocols known to her and her family's most trusted attorney, Dr. Gaspar Costa. She told Leo a fabricated story of a lonely childhood in a forgotten orphanage and embraced her new identity as a woman with nothing more than her husband's love. For 7 years, she played the part perfectly. She found genuine joy in the simplicity, in the anonymity. Watching Leo strive, she felt a sense of pride. She believed she was supporting his dreams, that their love was a fortress built on a foundation stronger than money. But the cracks had begun to show in her fortress. Leo's ambition, a quality she once admired, had soured into bitter resentment. He grew tired of their modest life. He began making sarcastic comments about her simple clothes, their economical vacations, and her lack of connections. "Did you see David Gouvea's new fiancée's ring?" he would comment after a work event, his eyes gleaming with a greedy light. "Must have been 10 carats. Her father is a shipping magnate from Seattle." Then he would look at Aurora's simple gold band, a symbol of the life he now despised, and his lip would curl in a slight sneer. He began working late, attending networking events that left him smelling of expensive perfume that wasn't hers. He became distant, his touch infrequent and perfunctory. The easy laughter that once filled their small home was replaced by a tense silence, punctuated by Leo's heavy sighs of dissatisfaction. Aurora felt the shift deepening in her bones. A cold dread began to collect in her stomach. She tried to talk to him, to bridge the growing chasm between them, but her gentle inquiries were met with irritation and accusations. "What is there to talk about, Aurora?" he exclaimed one afternoon, throwing his briefcase onto the dining room table she had so carefully set. "We're stagnant. We're going nowhere. I'm drowning, and you're content to just float. I thought we were happy," she whispered, her heart aching. "I thought this was what you wanted." "I wanted a partner," he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "Not a homemaker. I need someone who can help me, someone with resources." The word hung in the air between them, ugly and sharp. Resources. It was a word that had defined her entire life, a word she had run from, only to have the man she had sacrificed everything for throw it in her face. She looked at Leo, at the stranger across from her, his face contorted by a greedy ambition she had never truly seen before. And for the first time in 7 years, she felt the ghost of Aurora Ferreira stir within her. The game that had begun as a romantic escape was about to become a brutal war. And she was the only one who knew the true power of the weapons at her disposal. The final blow came on a crisp October afternoon, the air carrying the scent of wood smoke and decaying leaves. It was their 7th wedding anniversary. Aurora had spent the entire day preparing a feast, a recreation of their first date. Handmade pasta, a rich bolognese sauce she had slow-cooked for hours, and a bottle of Chianti she had splurged on. She wore a simple blue dress that he had once said was the color of his favorite sky. She waited, the table set with their best china, the candles flickering, her heart a fragile mix of hope and apprehension. Leo came home 3 hours late. He didn't even look at the meticulously prepared dinner. His face was flushed with excitement, his eyes gleaming with a manic energy she didn't recognize. He tossed a thick, cream-colored envelope onto the table, where it landed with a soft thump next to the untouched breadsticks. "What is this?" Aurora asked, her voice small. "This?" he said, pulling at his tie, a triumphant smile on his lips. "It's our future, or rather, my future." Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside were divorce papers. The sterile, legal language was a brutal counterpoint to the romantic dinner she had prepared. The words became a blur, but the message was clear. Irreconcilable differences, no fault, a clean separation. "I don't understand," she stammered, looking at him, her eyes wide with disbelief and pain. "Our anniversary." "Oh, Aurora, please," he sneered, waving a dismissive hand. "Don't be so naive. You actually thought this worked? This small, pathetic life? I'm meant for more. I've been given an opportunity, a real one, and I can't let you hold me back." The name on the legal documents, the party opposite hers, was a name she had heard him mention with increasing frequency, always with a tone of reverence. Catherine Rothschild, heiress to the European Rothschild banking fortune. A woman whose image was a staple on society pages, always dripping in jewelry and haute couture. A woman of resources. The pieces of his recent behavior clicked into place with nauseating clarity. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the scent of Chanel No. 5 that clung to his shirts. He hadn't just fallen out of love with her. He had been actively replacing her. "You're leaving me for her?" Aurora's voice was just a whisper. The pain was a physical thing, a shard of ice piercing her chest. "Leaving you, darling, implies we were ever on the same level to begin with," he said, his cruelty absolute. He began to pace the small living room, his movement suddenly too large for the space. "Catherine understands me. She understands ambition. Her father, Antonio Rothschild, is prepared to make me a senior partner in his new private equity firm. This is the major leagues, Aurora. This is where I belong." He finally stopped and looked at her, his gaze sweeping over her simple dress, her tear-streaked face, with ill-disguised pity. "Look, I'll be fair. The house is mortgaged, but there's a bit of equity. You can have it. You can have the car. It should be enough for a woman of your simple needs. 7 years of service, not love, not partnership. Service." The words echoed in the sudden silence of the room. He saw her as a servant. Now he was cutting staff. The love she had poured into his life, the sacrifices she had made, the identity she had abandoned. It was all worthless to him. He had not only broken her heart, he had invalidated her entire existence. "I gave you everything," she said, the words thick with unshed tears, choking in her throat. Leo laughed, a short, sharp, humorless sound. "You gave me nothing, Aurora. You had nothing to give. That's the problem." He picked up his briefcase, not the worn leather one she had bought him 5 years ago, but a new, sleek aluminum one she had never seen before. A gift, no doubt, from Catherine. He paused at the door, turning to deliver one last devastating blow. "I hope you find a quiet life for yourself," your voice tinged with condescending magnanimity. "Maybe you can work at that library you're so fond of. The position suits you. Just sign the papers. It's better for everyone if we do this quickly and quietly." The door closed behind him, leaving Aurora alone in the flickering candlelight. The smell of the bolognese sauce she had so lovingly prepared suddenly seemed nauseating. The beautiful meal was a monument to her own stupidity. He thought he was leaving a penniless orphan behind. He thought he was shedding dead weight to ascend to the stratosphere of the elite. He had no idea of the storm he had just unleashed. In that moment, as the last vestiges of her love for him died, something else took its place. The pain was still there, a raw, open wound. But beneath it, a different sensation began to burn. It was cold, it was hard, and it was completely unfamiliar. It was rage, a rage the size of the Ferreira fortune. She looked at the divorce papers on the dining room table, the legal instrument of her humiliation. "Quietly and quickly," he had said. She picked up her phone, her hands surprisingly steady, and scrolled through her contacts, past the local plumber and the dentist, until she reached a name she hadn't called in 7 years. The screen glowed with 2 words. Dr. Gaspar Costa. Her thumb hovered over the call button. The woman who made that call would not be the heartbroken wife in the blue dress. It would be the multi-billionaire heiress he never knew existed. The game was over. The war was about to begin. A phoenix rises. The first 24 hours after Leo's departure were a blur of empty-eyed shock. Aurora didn't cry. The pain was too deep for tears. A vast, hollowed-out cavern where her heart used to be. She moved through the house like a ghost, her home now a museum of their shared lives. Every object was a painful artifact. The chipped coffee mug he used every morning, the worn armchair where he used to read, the photographs on the mantel of a smiling, happy couple who had never truly existed. She grabbed a black trash bag, and with a cold, methodical precision, she swept away every photograph, every gift, every last trace of him. It wasn't a catharsis. It was an exorcism. By dawn, the house was stripped of its shared past, as empty as she felt inside. She finally allowed herself to look in the mirror. The woman who looked back was a stranger. Her eyes, usually so full of a gentle warmth, were dark and haunted. Her hair was pulled back in a simple, messy ponytail. She was wearing one of Leo's old faded t-shirts as a nightgown. This was the woman he had discarded, the weak, simple, broke orphan. He had created this version of her, and he had destroyed it. It was time for Aurora Ferreira to come home. She took a shower, the hot water a blessed shock to her system. She dressed not in her usual modest attire, but in the one emergency outfit she had kept hidden at the bottom of her closet. A pair of custom black trousers, a silk blouse, and a pair of simple, elegant leather flats. They were relics from her old life, a contingency she had prayed she would never need. Then, she made the call. The phone rang only once before a familiar, crisp, calm voice answered. "Dr. Gaspar Costa speaking." "Gaspar," she said, her own voice sounding rough and strange in her ears. "It's me." There was a pause, a stunned instant of silence on the other end of the line. Dr. Gaspar Costa, the gray-haired, impeccably dressed head of Ferreira Global, had been her father's closest confidant and had managed her family's affairs with unshakable loyalty for over 30 years. He was more of a father to her than her own had been. "Aurora," he finally breathed, the name a mix of surprise, relief, and deep, unstated concern. "My dear girl, are you all right?" "No," she said, the single word conveying a world of pain. "I'm not, but I will be." She took a deep breath, the air in the sterile house feeling charged with a new energy. "Gaspar, I'm coming back. I want you to execute Protocol Alpha immediately." Protocol Alpha, the code name they had invented years ago for the dissolution of the blind trust and the full reinstatement of her legal identity and financial power. It was the emergency button, the glass to break in case of a disaster. "Consider it done," Gaspar said, his voice instantly shifting from worried guardian to a relentlessly efficient executive. "A car will be at your location in 1 hour. We have the Mandarin Oriental penthouse in Lisbon prepared for you. Your security detail is being mobilized as we speak. What are your immediate instructions?" "The house," she said, looking around at the small suburban box that had been her cage. "Sell it. Donate the contents to charity. I don't want to see anything from this life again." She paused, her gaze falling on the divorce papers still on the dining room table. "And Gaspar, I need you to find out everything there is to know about a man named Antonio Rothschild and his private equity firms. I also want a complete dossier on his daughter, Catherine, and my husband, Leo Fernandez." "I already have a preliminary file on the Rothschilds," Gaspar said, his tone grim. "Antonio has been trying to make inroads against Ferreira Global's maritime logistics for years. This is not a coincidence, Aurora. It appears your husband was hunted as a valuable asset." The clinical business term was somehow more insulting than any emotional betrayal. She hadn't just been left. She had been strategically eliminated. "I understand," she said, her voice hardening. "One more thing, Gaspar. The divorce papers. Don't let Leo's lawyer file them. You will handle the proceedings." "With pleasure," Gaspar said, with a hint of steel in his voice. "We will file for adultery and fraud. His petition will be buried. He won't know what hit him." An hour later, a sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom, a car so out of place in San Diego it might as well have been a spaceship, pulled smoothly into her driveway. A man in an impeccable suit, her new head of security, opened the door for her. As Aurora slid into the luxurious leather interior, She cast one final look at the house, at the quiet street, at the life that was now nothing more than a nightmare. She didn't look back. As the car sped toward the private airfield, where a Ferrera Global jet waited, Aurora's phone, a new state-of-the-art satellite model provided by her security, vibrated. It was an encrypted message from Gaspar. Attached was a single document, the summary of Ferrera Global's holdings, line after line of incomprehensible numbers, company names, and market values that stretched into the billions. At the end was the net worth of the inheritance she now fully controlled. $217.4 billion. She looked at the number, not with joy or triumph, but with a chilling sense of purpose. Leo had left her for a woman with resources. He had despised her for having nothing. He had built his future on the foundation of her supposed poverty. He wanted to play in the major leagues. She was about to show him that he wasn't even in the same sport. The penniless orphan was dead. Aurora Ferrera, the multi-billionaire industrial titan, had returned from the ashes. And she was coming to collect a debt of 7 years of pain and humiliation, with interest. The game begins. The transformation of Aurora Mendez, the suburban wife, into Aurora Ferrera, the formidable CEO, was swift and absolute. It began the moment she stepped onto the tarmac of Humberto Delgado Airport and entered the rarefied air of her old life. The Mandarin Oriental penthouse, overlooking the majesty of Eduardo's 7th Park, was her chrysalis. It was a world of silent, efficient staff, floor-to-ceiling windows, and the ambient hum of immense power. Gaspar Costa waited for her, standing by a large mahogany table covered in files and electronic tablets. He looked older than she remembered, but his eyes held the same sharp intelligence and unyielding loyalty. He did not hug her or offer platitudes. He simply gave her a small, respectful nod. "Welcome back, Ms. Ferrera," he said. The title, so foreign for so long, fit her like a custom-made suit. "It's good to be back, Gaspar." The first few days were a whirlwind of intense briefings. She was a fast study. Her mind, so long occupied with domestic trivialities, proved to be as sharp and analytical as her father's. She absorbed 7 years of market fluctuations, technological advancements, and corporate strategy with a ferocious appetite. She was not just getting up to speed, she was preparing for war. The physical transformation unfolded in parallel. The simple, modest woman from San Diego was systematically erased. A team of Lisbon's finest stylists, trainers, and nutritionists descended upon the penthouse. Her long, unkempt hair was cut into a sleek, sharp bob that framed her face and highlighted her cheekbones. Her wardrobe of faded jeans and cotton sweaters was replaced with a carefully curated collection of Tom Ford power suits, elegant Dior dresses, and dangerously high Christian Louboutin stilettos. Her new uniform was an armor. Every piece was chosen to project an aura of untouchable power and icy elegance. And she learned to walk with a new posture, a straight-backed confidence that commanded attention. The soft, gentle cadence of her speech was polished into a precise, measured tone that brooked no argument. Within 1 week, she was ready. Her re-emergence was not going to be a quiet affair. It was going to be a statement. Gaspar had arranged an emergency meeting of the Ferrera Global Board of Directors, a collection of powerful, elderly men who had grown comfortable in her absence, managing the empire under Gaspar's steady hand, but without a true Ferrera at the helm. She walked into the Ferrera Global boardroom on the 8th floor of their Lisbon skyscraper. The click of her heels on the marble floor, the only sound in the cavernous room. All conversation ceased. The 12 board members, titans of industry in their own right, stared at her as if they had seen a ghost. They remembered a quiet, grieving teenager. They were not prepared for the woman who now stood before them. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said, her voice cool and firm as she took her place at the head of the table, her father's seat. "I apologize for my long absence. I've been busy with other matters. Rest assured, my sabbatical is over." She didn't wait for their responses. She launched directly into a brilliant and merciless analysis of the company's performance, pointing out missed opportunities, inflated divisions, and a lack of aggressive innovation. She presented a bold new vision for Ferrera Global, one that involved a major push into sustainable energy and a strategic acquisition of a cutting-edge artificial intelligence firm. She had their full, undivided attention. The sleepy, complacent energy of the room had been replaced with a palpable tension, a mixture of fear and reluctant admiration. But her grand strategy had a more personal and more direct target. "Finally," she said, her eyes sweeping the room. "I've been reviewing the file on Rothschild Banking's recent ventures. Their attempts to undermine our shipping logistics are amateurish, but persistent. It's time we sent a message." She brought up a new file on the large screen at the front of the room. It was an innovative, mid-sized logistics company called Logiflux. Logiflux developed a predictive shipping algorithm that could revolutionize the industry, she explained. Rothschild has been attempting to acquire them for the last 6 months. Their offer is currently stalled at $900 million. She paused, letting the information sink in. "This morning," she continued, a shadow of a smile touching her lips, "Ferrera Global put in a competing offer of $1.5 billion, all cash. The deal will close on Friday." A murmur of awe and excitement ran through the room. It was an aggressive, almost reckless move. It was a direct and public blow to Antonio Rothschild. "Furthermore," Aurora said, her gaze turning to ice, "I took a look at Rothschild's new private equity firm. It's a vanity project for his daughter and her new partner." She let the word hang in the air. "They appear to be focusing their initial investments on the luxury hospitality sector." She clicked to another slide. It detailed a portfolio of boutique hotels. "We will begin a systematic acquisition of key properties in every market they target. We will outbid them, absorb their targets, and exhaust their initial capital before they sign their first deal. I want their firm to be a complete and total failure. Is that understood?" The board members, once skeptical, now looked at her with a new respect that bordered on fear. This was not Ricardo Ferrera's daughter. This was a predator. As the meeting adjourned, Gaspar stayed behind. "A bold re-entry, Aurora," he said, with a glint of pride in his eyes. "You reminded them who is in charge." "I wasn't speaking to them, Gaspar," she said, looking out the window at the city below. "I was speaking to him. I knew the news of the Logiflux acquisition would hit the financial world like thunder. Antonio Rothschild would be furious, and Leo, so proud of his new position, his new life, would be right in the blast radius. He wanted to be in the major leagues. She had just changed the rules of his game, and he didn't even know he was playing against her. Do you think Leo realized the magnitude of the mistake he had made? Share your predictions in the comments. The price of betrayal. 2 months passed. Leo Fernandez was living the life he had always dreamed of. He and Catherine Rothschild were the city's new power couple. They had just moved into a sprawling penthouse on Rua de Sao Bento, a wedding gift from her father. Leo had a new title, Senior Vice President at Rothschild Private Equity, a corner office with a panoramic view of the city and a wardrobe of custom-made suits. Finally, in his own mind, he was a success. However, a shadow hung over his new paradise. Their first major venture, a fund to acquire luxury boutique hotels, had been a spectacular failure. Every target they identified, Every deal they pursued was inexplicably snatched away at the last minute by an unseen, deep-pocketed competitor. Rumors on the Lisbon Stock Exchange whispered of a newly aggressive Ferreira Global, but the moves were so precise, so targeted, that it felt personal. "It's a ghost," Antonio had told him at a board meeting. "Someone is toying with us. And you, with your fancy University of Lisbon title, don't seem to be able to figure out who." Tonight, however, he was destined for a moment of relief, a celebration of his status. It was the annual Stars Gala at the Museu do Oriente, the absolute pinnacle of Lisbon's social calendar. For Leo, this was his true arrival. He stood next to Catherine, her neck dripping in Rothschild diamonds, soaking in the camera flashes and the fawning compliments of the city's elite. He felt a wave of vindication. This was his place. For a fleeting moment, he thought of Aurora. He pictured her in her small San Diego house, probably watching some cheap soap opera, completely oblivious to the glittering world he now inhabited. The thought filled him with smug satisfaction. He had made the right decision. The great doors of the exhibition hall in the Mosteiro dos Jerónimos, where the main dinner was being held, swung open. A hush fell over the crowd, a sudden collective catching of breath. The sea of famous faces parted as a new figure made her entrance. She wore a shimmering midnight blue silk gown that clung to her like a second skin, a single, breathtaking diamond necklace. The legendary Ferreira star rested on her collarbone, catching the light and scattering it in 1,000 small rainbows. Her dark hair was styled in an immaculate sharp bob, and her eyes, cold and calculating, swept the room without missing a thing. She was flanked by two men, the venerable Dr. Gaspar Costa and Akira Tanaka, the brilliant and reclusive CEO of a rival tech empire, a man who rarely made public appearances. Her presence radiated an almost gravitational pull of power and influence. Leo's champagne flute slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor. His blood ran cold. The face was familiar, but the woman was an impossibility. It was Aurora, but it wasn't. It was as if his calm, simple wife had been possessed by the spirit of a vengeful goddess. "Who is that?" Catherine whispered beside him, her voice tight with jealousy and intrigue. "I've never seen her before." A portly, red-faced banker, a man who had been fawning over them moments before, laughed nervously. "You've been out of the country too long, Catherine. That's not just anyone. That's Aurora Ferreira." The name hit Leo like a physical blow. Ferreira. Global. The ghost in the machine that had been systematically dismantling his professional life. It couldn't be. It was a joke. A nightmare. "Ferreira?" Catherine repeated, her perfectly manicured eyebrows raising. "The Aurora Ferreira? I thought she was a recluse, a phantom." "Well," the banker said, his eyes glued to the approaching trio, "the ghost is back, and apparently she's friends with Akira Tanaka. There are rumors they're working on a merger. Can you imagine? Ferreira Global and Tanaka Industries could buy God." Leo felt the blood drain from his face. His carefully constructed world was tilting on its axis. All the pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The failed hotel deals, the Logiflux acquisition, the inexplicable and personal nature of the attacks on Rothschild. It had all been her. As if she felt his gaze, Aurora's eyes met his from across the crowded room. There was no flicker of recognition, no hint of their shared past. Her gaze was one of complete indifference, the kind of look one would give to a piece of furniture or a particularly uninteresting insect. That look was more devastating than any shout or accusation. It told him that he was nothing to her. She, Akira, and Gaspar moved through the room, a vortex of power. People Leo had been desperate to impress were now tripping over themselves to get a moment of her time. Antonio Rothschild, Catherine's formidable father, approached Aurora with a forced, obsequious smile. "Ms. Ferreira," Antonio said, his voice a summary of false cordiality. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I am Antonio Rothschild." Aurora extended a cool, gloved hand. "Mr. Rothschild, I have been following your recent market difficulties. Most regrettable." Her voice was pure silk, but the words were pure poison. Antonio's face tightened. "Indeed, it seems we have a rather aggressive new player to contend with." "Aggression is simply another word for efficiency," Aurora replied smoothly, before she directed her full attention to Akira Tanaka, dismissing the Rothschild patriarch as if he were a junior partner. Catherine watched, her face a mask of fury and humiliation. She turned to Leo, her voice a poisonous whisper. "You know her, don't you? How do you know Aurora Ferreira?" Leo couldn't speak. His throat was dry. His mind was a chaotic symphony of denial and terror. Catherine's eyes narrowed, a calculating, shrewd light entering them. She looked from Leo's pale face to the magnificent figure of Aurora Ferreira, and then back again. A slow, dawning horror spread across her features. "Oh my God," she breathed, comprehension hitting her. "She's your ex-wife, the poor, pathetic orphan you told me about." That was her. Leo could only nod. A single, jerky movement. The smug satisfaction he had felt moments before had curdled into abject terror. He had not only divorced a simple woman from the suburbs, he had betrayed, humiliated, and cast aside the most powerful woman in the room. He had thought he was climbing a ladder. Instead, he had just jumped off a cliff and was only beginning to realize how far he had to fall. Do you think Leo deserved what was happening to him? Or did Aurora go too far? Share your thoughts in the comments. The price of betrayal. In the weeks following the gala, Leo's life unraveled with a brutal swiftness. The Ferreira name was a death knell for his Rothschild career. Antonio, humiliated and furious, treated him with open contempt. Catherine, seeing him now not as a prize, but as the world's biggest fool, grew cold and distant. Their relationship devolved into a series of bitter arguments whispered in their cavernous, silent penthouse. Social invitations dried up. The fawning colleagues now avoided his gaze. He was a pariah, a walking warning. Aurora, meanwhile, operated from a sphere so far above him that he could only watch the fallout. She was a fixture in financial news, an industry supernova. The merger of Ferreira Global with Tanaka Industries was being hailed as the deal of the century, creating a worldwide behemoth that made all competitors smaller. Every one of her moves was precise, strategic, and devastatingly effective. But in the midst of the corporate warfare and financial machinations, Aurora felt empty. The revenge, while satisfying, was a hollow victory. She had dismantled Leo's world, but it hadn't filled the void in hers. The penthouse felt less like a home and more like a gilded cage. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, seeking refuge from her own thoughts, she did something she hadn't done in years. She went incognito to a small, independent art gallery in the Barrio Alto. Dressed in simple jeans, a cashmere sweater, and a baseball cap pulled low, she was nobody. She was just a woman, looking at art. The gallery was quiet. The air smelled of linseed oil and turpentine. The art was raw, powerful, and full of a desperate, beautiful energy. She was particularly drawn to a series of large abstract canvases, chaotic swirls of black, white, and a defiant, electrifying blue. They spoke of the storm within her own soul. "There's something there, isn't there?" The voice, low and resonant, startled her. She turned to see a man standing beside her. He was tall, with kind, intelligent eyes and paint-stained hands. He wore a paint-splattered t-shirt and worn jeans. He looked at the paintings, not at her, with a look of deep understanding on his face. "They're honest," Aurora replied, the words surprising her. "That's him," the man said, pointing to a figure in the corner. "The artist who is animatedly talking to a potential buyer. Arthur Coimbra paints like he's trying to get out of a locked room, all passion and fury." The man finally directed his gaze to her, a warm, genuine smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "I'm the owner, Daniel. Daniel Pereira." Aurora, caught off guard, introduced herself simply as Helena. For the next hour, Daniel guided her through the gallery, talking about the art not with the pretentious jargon of the art world, but with a simple, heartfelt passion. He saw the story in every brushstroke, the emotion behind every color choice. He didn't ask her what she did, where she lived, or who she knew. He simply talked to her about art. She felt a part of herself she thought was long dead begin to stir. It was the art history student from San Francisco University, the young woman who had been captivated by beauty and creation, not balance sheets and market caps. She found herself returning to the gallery several times in the following weeks. She and Daniel developed an easy rapport. Their conversations moved from art to books to music and to the simple absurdities of life in Lisbon. With him, she was not a Ferreira. She was simply Helena, a woman with a sharp eye and a quiet sadness he did not pry into. He was a welcome anchor in the turbulent sea of her new life. Meanwhile, a new and unexpected player entered the game. Akira Tanaka, her new business partner, was not the cold, reclusive genius the media portrayed. In their private meetings, she discovered a man with a dry wit, a fierce intelligence, and an almost unnerving ability to see through her carefully constructed armor. During a late-night strategy session in the Ferreira Global boardroom, as they finalized the details of the merger, he suddenly stopped, looking at her over the rim of his teacup. "You enjoyed this, didn't you?" he asked, his dark eyes intense. "Dismantling Rothschild? Humiliating your ex-husband?" Aurora stiffened. It was a necessary business strategy. Akira allowed himself a small, knowing smile. "Of course, but revenge is a fire that consumes its bearer, Ms. Ferreira. It will warm you for a time, but eventually it will only leave you with ashes." He set down his cup. "Antonio Rothschild is an old fool. Your husband is an insignificant parasite. They are not worthy of the energy you are spending on them. This company, our company, that is worthy of your energy. The future we can build is worthy of it." His words struck a nerve deep within her. He wasn't judging her. He was challenging her. He saw her not as a weapon of revenge, but as a brilliant leader, and he was calling her to be better. He was the first person in her new life to talk about the future, not the past. "What do you propose?" she asked. "Calm," he said. "I propose we stop playing defense." His eyes gleamed with a new intensity. "Let's build something revolutionary. Let's focus our resources on the new sustainable energy division. Let's create something that changes the world, not just settle old scores. That is a victory worthy of a Ferreira and a Tanaka." It was a turning point. Akira's challenge, combined with the simple human connection she was finding with Daniel at the art gallery, began to shift her perspective. The rage that had propelled her was starting to cool, replaced by a new, more compelling ambition. She had proven she could destroy. Now she was beginning to wonder if she could build anew. The war against Leo and the Rothschilds had been won, but the battle for her own soul, for the woman she wanted to become, was just beginning. And for the first time, she felt she didn't have to fight it alone. She had found allies not in bankers and lawyers, but in an artist's quiet gallery and across a boardroom table from a man who saw her future, not just her past. Do you think Aurora should forgive Leo or move on with her life without looking back? We want to know your opinion. The final reckoning, Leo Fernandez's freefall was swift and brutal. Fired from Rothschild, he became toxic on the Lisbon Stock Exchange. His luxurious lifestyle evaporated after a venomous annulment from Catherine, who even forced him to legally change his name to sever ties with her family. Broken and stripped of his identity, he moved into a dingy apartment in Amadora, where his ambition soured into a dangerous obsession. In his twisted logic, Aurora owed him for his awakening, and he convinced himself he could still have her back. He began a campaign of pathetic harassment, dozens of pleading, then threatening emails and voicemails, all intercepted by Gaspar's team. When his messages went unanswered, his desperation led him to a physical confrontation. One night, he evaded security and confronted her in the private elevator hall as she was leaving with Akira Tanaka. "Aurora!" he screamed, his appearance disheveled, his eyes wild. She looked at the hollow shell of the man she had married. "Leo," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "You need to stop this." "Stop this?" He laughed hysterically. "I'm just getting started. You think you can ruin me and walk away? I know the real you, the scared woman in disguise. That's not you." Akira took a slight step forward. "I think you should go." Leo's eyes filled with hatred. "And who are you? Her new pet?" Aurora cut him off, her voice like ice. "He is my partner, Leo. Something you never were." She turned and walked away without a second glance. The public rejection pushed him over the edge. If he couldn't have her, he would destroy her. He sold a twisted, fabricated story to a notorious tabloid journalist, Pedro Faria, painting himself as the victim of a manipulative and mentally unstable heiress. "She hid her billions to trap an unsuspecting husband," the headline screamed. The story was filled with intimate, distorted details designed to give it credibility. Simultaneously, Antonio Rothschild, seeking revenge, fed damaging stories to the financial press, questioning Aurora's stability and fitness to run a global empire. The combined attack was a perfect storm. Ferreira Global stock took a small hit, and whispers about Aurora's sanity began in the trading rooms. She was in a meeting with Gaspar and Akira when the news broke. Gaspar was apoplectic, planning a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. Aurora, however, was eerily calm as she read the article. Inside, the cold rage from the night Leo left her solidified. He had weaponized their intimacy, twisting the life she built with love into something pathological. "Don't sue them, Gaspar," she said in a low voice. "Aurora, we have to," he insisted. "We can't allow this." "No," she said, her eyes gleaming with a new and dangerous light. "A lawsuit is a battle. He has declared a war, and in a war, you don't file papers. You demand an unconditional surrender." She turned to Akira with a chilling smile on her face. "He thinks he can control the narrative by exposing our past. He's forgotten one detail. I know all of his secrets too, and unlike him, I have the evidence." The time for reacting was over. Leo and the Rothschilds had pushed her too far, mistaking her restraint for weakness. Now, she was going to show them what real power looked like. She was going to end this, not by winning, but by annihilating them completely. Aurora's counterattack was not a single, explosive event, but a masterfully orchestrated symphony of destruction. It began in silence. She unleashed the full, frightening power of Ferreira Global's legal and intelligence divisions, the teams that Dr. Gaspar Costa had kept razor sharp. Her first target was Pedro Faria and his tabloid. Within days, Ferreira Global investigators had unearthed a career of corruption. Gaspar didn't file a lawsuit. He personally delivered the entire incriminating file to the public prosecutor's office. Pedro Faria was arrested, and the story he had written about Aurora was publicly discredited. Next, she turned her attention to Antonio Rothschild. While he had been busy planting stories about her instability, Aurora's team had been conducting a deep forensic audit of the entire Rothschild banking operation. They found a pattern of insider trading and fraud. The evidence was irrefutable. Gaspar Costa arranged a private meeting with the Rothschild board, deliberately excluding Antonio. He presented the evidence, explaining that Ferreira Global now held a majority stake in Rothschild's debt. The message was clear. Either Antonio Rothschild was removed, or Ferreira Global would release the evidence and call in its debt, an act that would vaporize the Rothschild legacy. Within 24 hours, the board announced that Antonio was retiring for health reasons. His attack on Aurora had cost him his empire. The final piece of her strategy was reserved for Leo. It was to be the most public and devastating blow of all. She agreed to her first television interview with Inés Simoes, a legendary journalist known for her tough questions. The interview was broadcast live during prime time. Aurora walked in looking serene and powerful in a simple white dress. For the first half, she spoke eloquently about her vision for Ferreira Global. Then Inés changed the subject. "Ms. Ferreira, I have to ask you about the recent and very public attacks on your character. Your ex-husband, Leo Fernandez, has made some very serious accusations." Aurora looked directly into the camera. Her expression was one of sad resolve. "It's true," she said calmly. "Leo and I were married for 7 years. At his request, I lived a life separate from my family's resources. I did this because I was in love. The story he told was a painful and twisted version of our life. But what he failed to mention was the reason our marriage ended." From a folder, she took out a sworn affidavit detailing Leo's affair with Catherine Rothschild, which began over a year before their divorce. Then, she pulled out emails between Leo and Antonio Rothschild, which described the plot to trade his penniless wife for a senior position at the firm. "He didn't just leave me," Aurora stated. "He sold me." The control room of the broadcast was in stunned silence, but she wasn't finished. "Mr. Fernandez accused me of ruining him. The truth is, he was never the man he pretended to be. These detail thousands of euros spent on luxury items, while he was telling me we couldn't afford to fix a leak in our roof. And this?" She held up a final sheet. "It's his application to San Francisco University, where he lied about being an orphan long before he ever met me. Leo Fernandez's entire life had been a calculated fraud." She looked back at the camera, her eyes clear. "I didn't destroy him. I simply held up a mirror. My only fault was loving someone who was incapable of loving anyone but himself. I paid the price for that mistake, and now he has too." She ended the interview by announcing the launch of the Ferreira Foundation, a $2 billion trust to support victims of emotional and financial abuse. In his Amadora apartment, Leo watched his world collapse. She had exposed him completely. The accountability was final. In the aftermath of all this, the world saw Aurora as a model of strength. Ferreira Global's stock soared. Leo, a social leper, disappeared. There were rumors he was working a menial job in northern Portugal, a ghost of his own ambitions. Aurora's life, for the first time, was truly her own. The rage had subsided, leaving peace behind. The empire was no longer a burden, but a tool to innovate and build. Under her leadership and that of Akira Tanaka, the newly merged Ferreira Global Industries became a global leader in sustainable technology. Her work was her passion, a legacy that would make the small dramas of her past seem insignificant. Her partnership with Akira was one of deep mutual respect and shared vision. But it was outside the boardroom that she found the quiet joy that had so long eluded her. She continued her visits to Daniel Pereira's art gallery, always as Helena. He continued to be a stabilizing force, drawn to her quiet intelligence and resilient spirit, knowing nothing of her immense power. On a crisp autumn afternoon, a year after her return, they were strolling through Parque Eduardo VII. "You seem lighter," Daniel observed. Aurora smiled. "I feel lighter. There's something I need to tell you. My name isn't Helena." She told him everything. The Ferreira name, the hidden life, the betrayal, the return. Daniel listened patiently. When she finished, a long silence hung between them. "So," he said finally, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Does this mean I have to start calling you Ms. Ferreira?" Aurora laughed, a sound of pure relief. "I prefer Aurora." "Well, Aurora," he said, his eyes twinkling. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Now, are you going to finish that coffee, or are you going to use your billions to buy the whole cart?" In that moment, standing in the heart of the city she now commanded, she felt a profound sense of completeness. She had faced the ultimate betrayal and had emerged not only victorious, but whole. She was surrounded by people who saw her for who she truly was. Akira, who respected her mind. Daniel, who cherished her spirit. She had lost a fantasy built on a lie, but she had gained something infinitely more valuable, a reality of her own making. The hidden heiress was gone forever, replaced by a woman who stood proudly in the light. The mistress of her own vast, brilliant, and limitless horizon. She was betrayed, broken, and left with nothing. Or so he thought. The incredible journey of Aurora Ferreira, from a hidden wife to a multi-billionaire powerhouse, is a testament to the unshakable strength of a woman scorned. She didn't just get revenge, she rewrote the entire game. Her story proves that your past does not define you, and the deepest betrayals can forge the most powerful versions of ourselves. She took her love and turned it into a global empire, and her heartbreak into a beacon of hope for others.